Welcome to Money on Tap. Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. That's what we do on this show. We look at all sides of the issues, and we bring a fully independent planning perspective to the table.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. I'm Ben Brayshaw. I'm joined here once again with Dan Michelon and Seth Krussman. Give us a call at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. We have really a very interesting show. I'm pretty pumped about talking about it and bringing it to the table. We have America who has spent their entire lives investing in businesses, whether it's something you're doing on the side or you're building a big corporation. There's lots of questions about how to manage the exit strategy on that, on how to buy and sell a business. You know, there's this two sides to the story. There's a person who's looking to sell a business. There's a person looking to potentially buy the business. Matching those two things together with a business culture is complicated. Today we have a special guest, Tim Johnson, who's going to be joining us. And we're going to be talking about making your final step toward retirement. Now, you might be the person looking to sell a business today. You might be looking at selling a business 5 years from now. This is the show for you. If you're the person who says, hey, maybe one day I would get into a business if I could find the right thing, this is the show for you. The wealth of knowledge that Tim brings and the kind of the nationwide coverage that he offers in business brokerage and helping people understand what they own, showing how they can produce value and bring that to the table for a buyer is huge. He's with First Choice Business Brokers, and he'll be joining us in a little bit. Do you have any thoughts on that, Dan?
Yeah, I think that decision about whether to exit a business or enter business ownership is one of those just really significantly important decisions you might make in your life. And like anything else of this kind of significance and this kind of impact on your financial well-being, it's best done with professional advice. And that's what Tim can offer us here today.
Yeah.
I'm just looking forward to hanging out with Tim, you guys. He's awesome. If you haven't had a chance to meet Tim Johnson, you're going to really get an experience here today on Money on Tap. And gosh, it's going to be fun.
It's going to be a good time for sure. He's wonderful. If you have questions, you can call us and reach us at 855-226-8551, or you can email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. We're not going to have any white papers on this today, but we've had a number of conversations regarding annuities over the past couple of weeks with the market downturn and all the things going on. So feel free to reach out to us on those types of items. We'd love to provide that information and educate our listeners, and we thank you for that time. Before we get diving into our show with Tim, it's time for Money in the News.
All right, first up, we got an article here from Yahoo Finance. And the headline here is, drivers have decided Teslas are worth the higher sticker price, but are they ready to get burned on insurance? This is from Sigrid Forberg. It's one of those additional hidden costs that we haven't really dug into here on Money on Tap, but we've spoke a lot about, the price of gas and green energy and the kind of the pros and cons of going in either direction, considering the news here lately. And, of course, we all recognize that, generally speaking, EVs cost a lot more than a gas-powered car, and I think we spoke in the last show about what you figured about 13 months break-even point for you, Ben.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that may or may not have been part of that consideration is the cost of insurance. And what this article highlights is that, with a comparable EV versus gas-powered car, you can expect to pay roughly 25% additional premium for that electric vehicle.
That's shocking to me. I actually think my 13-month break even just went to 14. Insurance is a really sticky thing. We have people here at our office that handle insurance. Eric Morton and Sarah Vazani, great. They have done wonders for clients for home and car, and amazing scenarios for them. So a little shout out to them, and I appreciate all that they do. I think it's really interesting that the article really goes into the fact that it's just really about the replacement of the EV vehicles that's making it really more expensive. It's not that it's more dangerous. It has nothing to do with the fact that gasoline is just cheaper to insure than EV. It's just replacing a car that's hard to get.
Yeah, and they do mention that while the maintenance is going to be lesser, your oil changes, your belts and hoses and all that stuff, the kind of typical stuff that wears out will last longer in the EV, but the ability to service the batteries is something that adds to that insurance cost.
Yeah, so much to consider when you are stepping into these vehicles, and we've talked about them the other week, as a matter of fact. Just yesterday on Facebook, a good friend of mine, another advisor, actually was putting a post out there about him getting an EV and putting on solar panels and the experience that he has had with having to charge the EV, just some of the additional expenses. And his heart was actually going out to some of the people that don't have solar panels or some other way to augment the cost of charging their electric vehicles. So, hey, I love them. I think they're awesome. I do. I'm really excited about them. But there's also a lot of other considerations. And frankly, $4,000 in insurance on a vehicle is a little steep, friends.
It's a little steep. I think it was really interesting too. It's funny that your friend had mentioned that, but I was talking with somebody about the article we talked about the demand on the electrical grid. It just has not been considered. If the number of people went to EV cars,
that was actually one of the reasons that he did the solar power as well, was because he didn't want to be a consumer that was waiting the grid.
Well, good for him.
Very altruistic.
We'll bring him on next week.
Yeah, exactly. Seriously, we need more of him out there. All right. So next article up, Toys R Us. Boy, I remember doing articles about them when they went Chapter 11.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious, bringing it right back, Dan. This is from Fox Business. Lucas Manfredi mentions here that Toys R Us is looking to make a brick-and-mortar retail comeback in time for the holidays. Now, this is super interesting, and they've taken an entirely different approach. WHP Global acquired the controlling stake of Toys R Us back in March of 2021. Basically, what they're doing is they partnered with Macy's, and they're looking to open up in 400 stores for anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 feet.
I think it's a great idea, quite honestly, for Toys R Us to kind of bounce back to relevance here. But yeah, they've earmarked 400 different locations that they're going to put stores into in time for the holidays, trying to boost their retail sales. And one of the things that Macy's has picked up on or noticed here is that sales of toys throughout their stores overall since they began implementing this program is up 15%. So I think that kind of sidebar effect they were looking for, where if Toys R Us draws the shopper in, they're likely to pick up other items while they're there, of course.
Oh, of course. And I think that's interesting because I've always been waiting for the giraffe to come back.
So my understanding is that they're opening up these stores within the Macy's. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I read that correctly. I read it a couple of times. I'm like, just making sure. That was when I first saw the headline here on this article. Do you guys have Halloween superstores there?
Just the seasonal come and go kind of, yeah. We get
right,
those.
right.
Yeah.
That was exactly when I saw this article. I was like, hey, why don't they do that? And I'm reading through the article. I'm like, oh my gosh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. They're just taking up some space in Macy's. I think it's a tremendous service. I was so sad to see Toys R Us go away, because that was one of the big memories as a kid that I really looked forward to if there was an opportunity to go through Toys R Us. Now, being a parent, I don't remember being as excited about giving my kid that same opportunity.
No. No, I can feel my credit card burning now between the wife and kids with Macy's and Toys R Us tagging up. That's going to be a problem.
Right. And you notice how they put the batteries right near the entrance? I feel like really what you should do is grab the shopping cart full of batteries, and then you can go figure out what it is you're going to buy.
All right. Next up, our last article for today. We try to tie these articles together to really talk to people about various investment things. I think things come full cycle, and I'm glad you brought the Toys R Us, because it's like I see these companies almost go under, and then they have this rejuvenating experience, and who knows what we'll see in 5 or 10 years.
Could be a run for Macy's stock as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I thought it was interesting. You said it was up 15%. It actually says 15 times higher.
Oh.
It's 15 times higher in toy sales.
That's a big difference.
That's a big difference. So it's
good correction there.
Yeah. So it's remarkable what it has done, and that's interesting because they're two big names that have really come together in a way that, hey, I want Toys R Us. I want, people know that stuff. But our final article for today, which I really think our listeners would find significant value from, the power of dividend reinvestments in REITs, or real estate investment trusts. It comes from Stephen Kurtzon, and it's a Yahoo Finance article that we found. And I think this is really interesting because we do a lot of business in the real estate world in lots of different domains, and REITs is definitely one of them. They're going through the compound interest, and they're talking about how, over the last 20 years, over the last 30, and what 50 years would potentially bring for people. They're talking about that compared to banks. Now, obviously, banks are guaranteed and so forth, and REITs are stock that have up and down opportunities, both good and bad. But they're talking about a 4% dividend REIT reinvesting its dividends into the REIT compared to a 4% bank account, basically reinvesting those 4% into making another 4%, and then using the comparable. And it's pretty phenomenal for people who are looking for a real estate holding.
What's different about this is we've discussed compound interest. I think people get the general premise where you make interest on your money and then interest on your interest at the bank. What's unique about this or different about this and using a reinvested dividend story, whether it be in REITs or in other investments, is that when you reinvest in it versus the bank, that principal amount that you have has the opportunity to rise as well. So you're not only making interest on your interest, but the principal you began with has the ability to raise in value and still earn the same interest rate. So it's an opportunity to kind of get compound interest, but on a rising base.
Yeah, the story that I really come away here with is an example of compound versus simple interest, really. Buy the CD at the bank or, have your interest at the bank. It's just purely $100,000 putting out that whatever the interest rate is, and then you're still getting the interest rate on the $100,000 versus a reinvestment and a compounding effect that you get from taking something like a real estate investment or something, putting out a dividend and reinvesting that dividend. You don't always have to take that, by the way, just in terms of how these different investments work. Sometimes people really want that dividend because maybe they're needing that for income, and that's another way that's another kind of an investment that this could be as well. But from the story's perspective and what they're trying to illustrate here, great job. Thank you very much for making that plain for us.
I think what's really, I think one of the interesting points here is that they talk about the 20-year period, REITs versus the Russell 1000. And they talk about ending in 2019, December 2019, pre-COVID, right? Previous 20 years. The REIT reinvestment option produced 11.6% yield, where the Russell 1000 was 6.29%. I mean, that's almost twice as much of a return. And then, as they go through this for 30 years, they compare the 4% at the bank reinvesting versus a REIT with a 4% return with a 3% average growth on the stock. Okay, so you have the stock growing. The 30-year number at the bank was up 3.5 times, 30 years. But when you go to the REIT space with that 3% increase on average, you're talking about 7.5 times you're on your money. You go to a 50-year period, okay, a 50-year period on the REIT space, it was up 30 times the initial deposit. A 4% reinvested with 3% return. I mean, that is...
And that illustrates the difference where in one scenario at the bank, your principal is your principal.
Yeah.
And in the REIT world or any investment where you're reinvesting in dividends, the principal is growing as well.
I mean, just to clarify, obviously the bank's guaranteed, REITs are not. And, there's REITs that have gone out of business and there's lots of risk inside this. But I think it's an interesting point because the real estate world has really, people are looking for dividends right now in a down, depressed market. And there's a lot going on. And so people are looking for this kind of yield. And you know what? Statistically, there's options out there that this would work for some people. And it's worth noting if you're really saying, hey, I've got money. We have clients at the time. Money at the bank is just sitting there doing nothing, and I'm not spending it. Maybe this is an option for you. Well, you're listening to Money on Tap. That's going to be a wrap for us on Money in the News. Up here shortly, we're going to have Tim Johnson joining us right after this quick break, talking about buying and selling businesses, making your final step toward retirement. You've been spending a lot of time. You might be looking at selling a business in the next year or 2 years or 5 years, but you got to get ready to do it. You might be looking to buy a business and you might be 3 to 5 years away. Tim Johnson is a unique person, has the ability to really match it up. His history of owning businesses and being successful in that and has really brought the ability for him to be able to match people together in a successful way. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back.
We appreciate you listening to Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan. You can contact us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com.
Folks, we have a lot of fun doing this show, Money on Tap, and Ben and I have been financial planners for years and years, and our goal here with you is to bring you into the room, have the conversations that we have. We think these are critical conversations for you, but we understand this is a limited space. And what we'd love to do is to open the doors to you with us at Brayshaw Financial Group so you could experience what it means to have three-dimensional planning in your life. Let's take a look at all sides of your situation, your scenario, and see how we can put together the best plan possible, taking into account your risk. How much can you have in the market? How much do we need to have set aside and doing different things for your life? That's what we do as planners, how we engage with you, and we welcome you to do that with us. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Now, if you have $250,000 that are investable assets today, our planning is free to you. We want you to have the playbook to have a successful experience in retirement. Give us a call, 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Ben and I welcome you to Brayshaw Financial for complete wealth management.
Now back to Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap, and I'm Ben Brayshaw, joined here with Dan Michelon and Seth Krussman. We have a special guest today in our show, Buying and Selling Businesses, Making Your Final Step Toward Retirement. We have a special guest here, Timothy Johnson. Tim Johnson is owner of one of the First Choice business brokerage firms, and he has been buying businesses and working with businesses for about 30 years and helping people in his own. He has a master's and MBA from Regent University of Organizational Diagnosis, and he is currently out of Chesapeake, Virginia, and covers nationwide buying and selling businesses. And I'm super happy to have you here today, Tim. I think this is going to be really interesting because it's been on our plan to have you on the show for a long time because there are so many baby boomers looking to sell their business. They're looking to exit into retirement fully. What do you think about that?
Yeah, thanks, Ben, for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, there is going to be a high demand of baby boomers looking to sell, especially coming off this pandemic. You know, it's kind of been like the last straw. Right. I mean, they've been through the Great Recession in 2008, the dot-com bust in, early 2000s, and now this pandemic, and now they're going into labor shortages and inflation. So
now seems like a really good time.
Yeah, it's like the last straw as they're getting older. They don't want to deal with any more hassles.
Yes, absolutely. So you're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. But Tim Johnson, you can email him at timj@fcbb.com for First Choice Business Brokers. And his phone number is 757-866-2321. Now, Tim, I think what most of the questions that we have, I mean, we were actually before the show like scattering you with questions. And I was like, hey, let's hold those for the show. They're really good. I think, let's first start off a little bit about, tell us a little bit about your background and, how you really got into working with First Choice.
Yeah. Became a business broker because I'd owned or been involved with small businesses for, 20 years almost. And had about, a dozen transactions of my own between buying and selling. And the last business that I sold, or after I sold my last business, I spent a good amount of time looking for a new business to buy and then working with, various business brokers out there. And, what I came to realize is like they weren't doing a very good job for their sellers. Like they were I was doing the job as the business broker, as the buyer, because I was having to put together the financials and add backs and really try to figure out what this business was worth. And that's really the job of a business broker. So after going through all that and going through my own transactions, I was like, man, I should really get into business brokerage and help people get to the next stage of their life. And as sellers, a lot of times that's retirement, or just they want to get out of that industry and do something else. They want to, we've had guys sell and move down to Puerto Rico, and that was their dream. And then you have buyers on the other side who are looking to get to that next phase or maybe add to their current business that they currently have. So it's really fun helping people get to that next level.
Yeah, some of the stuff I know about your past specifically is, you've worked with a large number of very large corporations in helping sell franchises even and helping people, finding the right people to acquire a franchise and so forth. So you've really been on both sides of the table here.
Yeah. I mean, my experience has been mostly with, before getting into business brokers, either as a franchisee or working with franchisors and, in operations and coaching them, getting them to get their business to the point of wanting to sell and making it profitable so that they were building up equity, in their business.
Yeah, I think that's really why I'm really excited to have you on the show today. Is it's really hard to find somebody to help sell your business. Know that you're dealing with someone that's competent, that understands all the moving parts. It's a really very big three-dimensional process. You've got someone who's selling a business. They're concerned about their employees. They're concerned about the story they've created over the many years, decades of time, quarters of centuries, maybe multiple family generational passings. And ultimately, they're concerned about having a transition that speaks the same story, that same, integrity, that same, and then finding the person that's really going to come in and be a good fit. No one wants it to be a failure and collect their money and move on. They still want to see it do well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the sellers that we work with, we have a seller right now where it's second generation. It's been around 35 years. They want to make sure that this business that they've spent their life, their careers on kind of gets to the right owner. And, ideally, in the ideal scenario, we have a business that's appealing to enough that you have multiple offers and you can kind of find that right person. But, most of the time, the buyers that are coming in, and they have the ability to purchase a decent-sized business, they're pretty good businessmen, too. Like, they know about caring for the employees. And if they're going to make this investment, they're going to have some experience in this world to kind of carry that business on. So that is usually a big question. But once you get into it and you start meeting some of these potential buyers that are qualified to buy your business, you're like, okay, I understand who I'm working with now, and it's going to be all right. They're going to take care of my people and take care of my customers. Yeah.
So for the different businesses that you come across from the buyer and seller perspective, particularly for the seller, I would presume that valuation is a key component of this, right? They want to make sure they're getting what their business is worth, and that's not always easy to come up with. So can you tell us a little bit about how you help somebody value their business?
Yeah, Dan, absolutely right. Valuing a business is very different than valuing a, like real estate, where it's a little more cut and dry, because there's so many variables to selling a business and what makes it valuable. But one of the first steps that when we're working with people that are looking to sell their business is, let's get into the numbers a little bit. This is completely confidential. Our nature of our whole business is, sellers don't really want people to know they're selling. They don't want their employees. They don't want their customers, their vendors. So we sign NDAs and, let them know this is all with a trusted professional. But we start digging into the financials and see what, the numbers that we're looking at. And we own a database because small business sales aren't on public record, right? So it's not like real estate where everything's public and you can get comps very easily. But the one way that we can get comps is the SBA does acquisition finance, or guarantees acquisition financing. And so we own a database from all those transactions. So we're able to get comps of what similar type businesses have sold for. And we look at 4 different valuation methods mostly. And because it's not straightforward, we want to see, okay, based on, we call it seller's discretionary earnings, and that's defined as your profit plus all the perks you get out of your business, your salary, health insurance,
your golf membership,
your retirement contributions, golf memberships, the trip to Maui, all that sort of stuff. So you add back all that to get to a number. And so you have a multiple for that. If your business is larger with profit over $500,000, you look at the EBITDA number, which is earnings before interest, depreciation, tax, and amortization. And that's a little bigger multiple because you have a bigger business. They tend to get a little better multiple when you start going over $500,000 in profit. And then gross revenue multiples and a modular method. But you got to look at them all and kind of average them together and kind of get a range of, what's my business worth.
I think that's as good a reason as any as I've heard to work with a professional, because that sounds like pretty complicated stuff.
Well, yeah, and when you're not in that world, you don't really, you hear things and be like, oh, it's 5 times gross, or and that's just way off, right? But you still have a profitable business. It's still worth good money, but you got to value it right. If you don't value it right, you're going to be wasting everyone's time, because a lot of these buyers for these businesses, they know where it should be, where the world should be. And if you're way off, that they're not even going to waste any time on it.
So, Tim, you get a business owner that's referred to you or comes to you and says, hey, I'd like to take a look and see approximately what the value is of my business. Probably the first thing they're trying to understand, is this worth it for me to, step outside, or should I keep it, or, pass it down, or something along those lines. But maybe there's kind of like a third component there that offers them, if you were to, change something here, or maybe you kind of consult a little bit around their business to try to help them improve some areas that they could see a better return around. Is that something that's kind of the extra mile, or something that you feel confident speaking to?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are, and I always recommend to sellers, like, don't wait until the last minute, like, to sell. Like, let's talk about it. Even if you're not interested in selling right now, at least gather some information so we can kind of give you, okay, here's what your business is worth today. But if you do these sort of things, here's what it could be worth. A lot of times sellers have a number in mind, right? Let's just say it's $1 million. That's what I'm trying to get. And we start digging into the numbers and we'd be like, hey, you're really worth about $750 right now. You're not quite at the $1 million. But if you did this, we think it could get you up to $1 million. And some of those things that you want, it's just to give, I think this would be helpful for sellers listening out there. What are some of the things that I can do to make my business more valuable? One of the first thing is, get clean books. Like, we all know small business owners, there's cash coming in and out.
Yeah.
You're writing things off. But in the ideal world, buyers are looking for a business that is that can be guaranteed by the SBA.
Right.
Most of the time for small business sales, and we deal with businesses from, $100,000 to $20 million. But most of the time on these small business sales, up until the $5 million mark, the buyers are looking for financing from a bank. And a bank is only going to finance acquisitions most of the time if it's going to be guaranteed by the SBA. And when they're guaranteed by the SBA, the bank can only look at certain things in calculating the profit and the net profit. And they're looking at the net profit to make sure there's enough cash flow in order to support the debt service and support the cost of living of the buyer.
You're listening to Money on Tap. We have Tim Johnson with First Choice Business Brokers. You can email Tim at timj@fcbb.com, or the phone number to the office is 757-866-2321. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there listening that you've built this business and this is your retirement. You haven't put away in your IRAs and you haven't created 401k plans or simple IRAs, but this is your legacy towards your next step of retirement, and finding somebody who's competent and capable of handling that sale is super, super important. Somebody who can get you the most money for your practice, or even if you're looking to buy a business, somebody who can help you find the one that fits you well. Tim Johnson is just that guy, and we are going to be right back after this quick break. Don't go anywhere. You can email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com or call us at 855-226-8551. Don't go anywhere. We're going to finish this up.
For a number of our listeners, they have a lot of questions, and you might be one of them. Today, we're just offering what we call Zoominars, webinars over Zoom meeting rooms where we have top experts, Social Security, estate planning, and financial planning experts for you to speak with, do a private consultation that way today. We're also having webinar-based Zoominars where we're going to have multiple groups where you can be part of that and enjoy that as well. Give us a call at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com to schedule your Zoominar.
You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. We are joined here today with Tim Johnson, who is the owner of one of the first choice business brokerage firms. His website is businessesforsalehamptonroads.com, but probably the easiest way to get a hold of him is his email address, timj, for Tim Johnson, timj@fcbb.com. And I'm super excited to have Tim here because, as I mentioned right before the break, people look at their businesses, and I grew up in a family that had that perspective, so I know this well. My dad owned a printing company, and that was a big deal for him. But he poured every waking hour into it. Every dollar they earned from it went there. They didn't save for it. The whole company was his retirement. That was his exit strategy. And then that was taken over by one of my brothers. And so that my brother became the exit strategy, so there's a whole nother set of planning there. And you may be the owner of a generational business, or you may be the creator of your own business, and you're looking at retirement and you're not sure what to do and what the next steps are. That's what we're talking about today, and we have Tim Johnson here. And I'm just going to bring it back to you, Tim. We were talking about the SBA. We're talking about, building a financial story that was viable in the banking and the small business administration area.
Yeah, Seth had asked, what can I do to make my business more valuable? And one of the things is clean financials so that the buyer can get SBA guaranteed financing. And the reason that you want that is when the SBA guarantees these, most of the time the buyer just has to come up with 10% of the sale price. So immediately our pool of potential buyers has gotten bigger because instead of coming up with $1 million or $2 million or $3 million, you only got to come up with 10%. So, and a lot of investors, especially...
Wait, you only have to come up with 10% to buy the business potentially?
Yes,
yeah.
10%. And then the other thing that's appealing about it is you get most of your money up front, and the buyer has a 10-year term on this financing.
Yeah.
So it's a great deal all around. And then if it weren't for the SBA, banks wouldn't do these sort of deals because most small businesses don't have hard assets to collateralize the loan. So
does this work? I'm a little familiar with the SBA. So a local bank would take a portion of the risk, usually like the first 50%, right? And then the SBA takes 40%, but they're the second holder of that debt. And then the owner or the buyer puts up 10%. Is that how that works?
Yeah. So, through the pandemic, the SBA changed their guarantee amounts several times. Can't remember exactly what it's at, but at one point it was the SBA was guaranteeing 90% of the loan. So that was encouraging banks to lend. They wanted banks to keep on lending, to keep the transactions flowing. I think it might be down to 80% now, but for you, it doesn't, the buyer or the seller, it doesn't really matter. It's not your problem anymore. That's the nice thing, right? It's the bank's problem.
Right.
Getting that money. So once you get your money, it's yours. I mean, you can go invest it with the
financial advisor. I don't know anybody you can call other than Brayshaw Financial Group. So this is really interesting because there's a lot of exit issues. There's, I mean, we deal with business owners all the time. I mean, that's all we pretty much deal with most of the time is people who own their own business or have been an executive at a company, and they've got very specific issues. They've got the business, they've got their employees, they've got the real estate. And we handle all of those things, all of those transactional pieces to try to get the person from point A to point B, because I think one of the things that I think is funny is that most business owners don't want to keep the real estate, and that's kind of an advisable thing in the business brokerage world. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways when the business owner owns the real estate. Sometimes they feel comfortable being the landlord now, right? And they kind of like that annuity stream. Other times, they just don't want to deal with the hassle anymore. They just want to be done, move to Florida, not have anything to worry about, not a building, So it can go both ways. A lot of times, the buyer wants that real estate because, they want to have that, investment in the real estate as well as the business, and there could be some benefit there, cash flow wise too. So.
I know that, like, in some cases too, it's almost like any buy-sell, event never seems to go entirely perfectly smooth. And, the buyer and seller usually don't walk away best buddies. So to be the landlord of the guy you just sold to could be a hassle or a problem. I mean, I've experienced that with clients. They've been like, listen, I got to get rid of this building. I can't stand this guy renting from me. Everything's a problem, and I just want to get out of it. What do you do in that case?
Yeah, then that's the role of the broker too, to help negotiate it. And, when you're working with a broker, the nice thing is there's an in-between guy, right? So, if a seller calls me irate, ready to, over whatever, who knows what it could be, your broker can kind of be your buffer guy, right? To try to keep that relationship, because there's going to be a transition too. So, usually some sort of training, handoff, whatever. So you want to try to keep that relationship. And it's stressful. I mean, this is one of the biggest probably, transactions you're going to deal with. And we understand it can be stressful and all those sort of different things. And it's stressful for the buyer too, because this is making a big investment. So working with a broker kind of helps be that buffer. And, I can come at a request maybe a little bit differently than the buyer is asking or, whatever. So it's both sides, and that's what we try to do. It's an interesting role that you're put in. So
I just thinking, Dan, I know you're just going to ask a question. I'm sorry. I was just thinking about the preparing for your business for sale. We talked a little bit about, the taxes and stuff like that. But what are is there like a kind of a standardized, what do you go through and what are you working on? How do you evaluate that personally as a business broker and trying to help somebody figure out, hey, listen, these are the things you need to do to, prop this thing up?
Yeah. So, number one thing, clean financials. It's always, I'll give you some quick things too. Like, how long have you been in business? If you've been in business 10 plus years, that's a positive, right? Is your revenue going up or down? It's always harder to sell a business going down because you don't know where that floor is as a potential buyer. I mean, is this last year the floor? Is it because of COVID? And by the way, if your business was affected by COVID and you've bounced back, usually even banks can rule out 2020. Like, okay, I got hammered in 2020. It was a down year, but now I'm kind of back to 2019 levels. So we can throw out 2020, even, depending on how you bounce back from some of these shutdowns and things. 2021, we had a business that had a bad 2021 because of COVID, but banks, she's back to where she was in 2022. Even though she doesn't have a full year, the banks are okay with it because they know the story and they know that the pandemic, hurt some of these businesses. So is your revenue going up or down? Years in business. What's your role in the business? Do you have management in place? Are you working at 40 hours a week? Buyers love businesses where they can come in and manage and not do.
Right.
And I know there's all sorts of books on that and different things, but they want to come in and there's a manager in place, and then I can come in and just make sure all the gears are working, and I keep this machine operating. Is there how long have your employees been there? Is it a competitive industry? Like, longevity of employees is important too. So some of those things are important to make it appealing to your buyer.
Tim, so if you're in the circumstance where perhaps the record keeping hasn't been 100% pristine over the last few years, but for whatever reason it is still time for you to exit, what options exist? Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of cases where your business isn't able to be financed by the SBA. And so ideally everyone wants their cash up front, but a lot of times that's just not feasible, or a buyer doesn't want to put that much risk into it. So what we see out there a lot of times is, some seller financing, where a buyer comes in with a down payment.
What would you usually see at that, like for a down payment?
Well, I can give it goes across the board, and it depends how motivated you are to sell too.
Right.
So the more seller financing you option, the quicker it'll sell. So the more cash that you need up front, a lot of times it takes you longer to sell. So how motivated are you to sell can determine how much that seller financing would be. But most of the time in the last year, what we've typically seen is like 50% down. Those are some actual transactions.
Yeah.
There was a couple deals just recently, and it was 50% down, and 50% over. I think one was 3 years and one was 5 years. Okay. And it also has to kind of cash flow for the buyer too, right? They don't want too much debt service where they're not able to pull some money out themselves. So seller financing is something we see pretty regularly. And a lot of times, even with SBA financing, the bank still wants you to hold a portion of the deal. So say the deal was $1 million, they might want you to hold 10% of the transaction.
So the buyer comes up with 10%. Maybe you're holding 10%. The bank or the SBA are doing all or a portion of
the 80%.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because the bank kind of wants you to have some skin in the game, make sure you uphold your non-compete, that you help with the transition, you help transition customers, so it's a kind of win-win.
Yeah.
Out there, and then sometimes the price doesn't make sense for 90% financing from the bank, so and they'll want you to hold that 10%. They call it on standby for a certain amount of time. And then you get started getting paid on it at a later date when the SBA loan is paid down.
Gotcha. I think, we were talking about you had recently had a large $3 million company sell a nursing home, I think it was. And,
yep.
And they had some interesting financing. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. A lot of times we'll have a seller ask us, hey, this business is ready to take off. Like we're going to go from $1 million in revenue to $3 million in revenue. But in this size transaction, most buyers do not want to pay for future revenue, right? But in this particular case that Ben's referring to is, there was several homes, and they were about to open another home and double their clients base, essentially. So the home was almost ready, but it wasn't quite ready before the transaction. But these guys wanted to get out. And so what we were able to do was structure something where they got paid for what the company was worth today, and the bank financed it, and they were great with it, but also set up basically a royalty stream for anything above where the company was when they closed on the deal. So, it was a royalty stream for the next 10 years. So everyone seemed to be pretty happy with that because, they got potential future revenue coming in, the sellers, and the buyer got a decent deal with, they're going to have to go through a lot of work to get this other home open, but they're happy to pay a royalty on it to get it. So there's lots of different ways to structure deals.
Hey, Tim, I got to ask you, do you have like a favorite kind of a business that you really love to work with? Or do you have just one of those like favorite stories that kind of, I don't know. You go with that, whichever direction you want to go. But I want to hear from you what you really love about it.
My favorite type of business is the one that sells, right? But But you know,
it's a long process, right? I mean,
it's a long process,
how long
yeah.
do these things go for?
Yeah, good point. I mean, don't wait until the last minute to sell your business. I mean, on average, it's 6 to 8 months to get a deal. And then if you're working with a bank, you know, they're so slow right now. I mean, it's, you know, labor shortages and all that. I mean, you're talking at least 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. But yeah, I mean, being a business broker, Seth, I mean, it's interesting because you're working with all sorts of businesses. So I don't know in-depth knowledge of certain industries, but, you know, you go out to the oyster farm and then my next stop's a pizza shop or, it's all across the board. So that's what really makes it interesting. And then just helping people get to that next phase, you know, that's fun. And yeah.
Yeah, that's got to be, you know, I think about all the different varieties of businesses I've heard you talk about over the years. And it's just, the scope is huge. I think that brings a lot of value, though. I mean, you know, for our listeners, you know, you might be listening and saying, hey, I'm a plumber, or I own a printing company, or I own a software company. You know, you want somebody who has experience in a lot of different things to be able to say, not only this is what you need to do to sell your business, this is the kind of buyer we're looking for. And I think that, you know, having success matching people up over the years and the background you have from a number of different areas really brings some real value to that. You are listening to Money on Tap. We have a special guest, Tim Johnson, with us with First Choice Business Brokers. His email is timj@fcbb.com, First Choice Business Brokers. His phone number is 757-866-2321. I'm Ben Brayshaw, joined here with Tim Johnson, Dan Michelon, and Seth Krussman, partners in Brayshaw Financial Group. We'd love to hear from you. You have a question, you want to sell a business, you're not sure if this is right for you, we'd like to get you in touch with Tim or reach out to him directly, or call us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. We are going to be right back. We're going to finish this up. We have some really interesting conversation that we're going to finish up with how to get this done, and you know, what does it cost to sell your business? I think those are questions on our listeners' ears. We will be right back.
We appreciate you listening to Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan. You can contact us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more of this week's program.
Thank you for sticking around. You're listening to Money on Tap. I'm Ben Brayshaw, joined here with Seth Krussman and Dan Michelon. We're all partners and planners at Brayshaw Financial Group, and we have Tim Johnson, who is a business broker, and we've been talking to him this hour regarding he works with First Choice Business Brokers, talking to him about selling your business, you know, that exit strategy to retirement, or maybe you're looking to just exit working in corporate America and you're looking to buy a business, or you're ready to own your own business. He's the guy to call. His phone number is 757-866-2321, working nationwide. His email is timj@fcbb.com, firstchoicebusinessbrokers.com. And you can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. As we're closing out this period, boy, we could probably talk another couple hours.
Yeah.
We've been chatting on and off during these breaks too. But Tim, let's talk a little bit about, cost. Let's talk a little bit about, is my business even worth anything to sell? The size businesses that you work with. Let's chat a little bit about both of those.
Yeah, sure, Ben. Typically from a seller's standpoint, the first step is we call it a market price analysis. And the reason that we do that is a lot of brokers out there, they'll just pick a number out of the air for your business. We want to have some, reasoning, why we're pricing this business out the way that we are. And then we're going to show that to the buyer. Be like, this is why we're asking this price, is because other businesses like yours have sold for this price. And it's based on those multiples from the SBA. So we do a market price analysis, and to get that done, usually we're looking for 3 years tax returns or 3 years income statement and a current balance sheet. So And then we can do our analysis. We'll jump on a call and kind of understand your business a little more, get all those add backs back in there, all those personal things, the W-2 wages, anything that's not needed to operate the business, and kind of get at that bottom line so you get the most value. And then, people ask, okay, well, what happens after that? We sign a listing agreement, and the biggest question is, how much do you cost? And your typical business broker is anywhere from 10 to 15% of the sale. And however, once you start getting into the six figures, that number starts to tear down a bit and gets a little smaller. And we sign a listing agreement, and we gather a bunch of information so that we have a really good package of information for a buyer, like thorough, like we're, almost everything they need in order to make a decision. So it shortens the life cycle of the sale.
So someone sends you an email at timj@fcbb.com, and what's the first thing? So how do you respond to this? What's the process feel like?
Yeah, I mean, I love to start out with a conversation with you, just understanding your business. Every business owner has a story. Tell me your story. Yeah. Tell me about the downturn in 2008 and what happened in the pandemic, and how you can't find the employees, or maybe it's a great story of, I bought this up from scratch. So I want to know your story, how you're operating, and then we can kind of dive into the numbers. And it's completely confidential. When we advertise a business, and there's lots of different ways that we go about finding buyers, but we always get your approval for it. We don't want to break confidentiality. And, we give enough to get someone interested, but not enough so they know who you are. And then they got to sign a very thorough non-disclosure agreement to receive any information. They got to show proof of funds, and we give them different levels at different times so that we know that we're dealing with a serious buyer before they get a lot of information on your company. So,
one of the things we chatted about over break, which I was like, we got to halt this because I want to hear this on radio. But if you're like suffering after the pandemic and your business is just totally crashed, and you're still plugging along, you're still trying to find employees, and you feel like you've really behind the eight ball. Tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, we have some folks that place a high value on their business, and then some folks like, man, my business is just not worth, anything. Or, I don't think I'm going to get the value that, I think that I should. Once was.
Yeah.
So there's creative things that we can do, especially if you're motivated to sell and you're like, I'm just done. There's creative things to do to get you some additional value, or maybe it's worth more than you think that it's worth. So we've seen some creative things out there because of the pandemic, and getting people the number that they should get.
Yeah, you mentioned gates. Explain that.
Gates.
I think that's interesting.
Yeah, so a lot of buyers, they're willing to pay for what the business is worth today, like the nursing home we were talking about earlier, but they'd also be willing to pay more if it came back to those pre-19 levels.
Yeah.
So say before COVID, you were at $1 million in revenue or $2 million, and now you're at 1.5 still. A buyer would be willing to, and it's still kind of working its way back. You see, I'm getting there, but it's not quite there, but I want to sell. We put in a gate or a trigger that says, okay, at this revenue amount, the buyer's going to make X amount of dollars payment to you. So kind of both people
so
win.
You're not completely falling, like you're not, because there's 20,000 people a day retiring. 20,000 people a day. Baby boomers are, crisscrossing retirement left and right, looking for exit strategies. And honestly, there's not enough people out there to buy companies. And I think that's where someone like yourself comes in so strategically, because you need somebody who's going to find a great buyer, that's going to find a buyer at all, and find someone to keep the business going. Because sometimes it's your namesake, like it's your name on the company.
Yeah. And buyers, the risk for them is, okay, if I pay 2019 numbers and we never hit it, then I'm kind of hosed, right?
Yeah.
So, this is a good way to, be a win for everyone involved, and, it can work.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. You've been listening to Money on Tap. I'm Ben Brayshaw, and we have had Tim Johnson as our guest today. And if you're looking to sell your business or interested in selling your business, or you think that's part of your future, give us a call at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. You can reach Tim directly at timj@fcbb.com. That's firstchoicebusinessbrokers.com. And his phone number is 757-866-2321. You will not be disappointed connecting with Tim on this. And thank you, Tim, for being here today. It's been great.
Thanks for having me.
Dan. Thanks, Seth. And we will talk to you guys next week. Have a great one, and we'll see you then.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of this radio station and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. No strategy, product, material, or tool mentioned can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information, products, materials, or tools mentioned should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. This show may be subsidized in whole or in part by a product sponsor or issuer. Securities and advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. All other services offered through Brayshaw Financial Group LLC are independent of SagePoint Financial. SagePoint Financial and Brayshaw Financial Group do not provide tax or legal advice. Main office is located at 116 South River Road, Bedford, New Hampshire, 03110, and can be reached at toll-free 855-226-8551.